What is up, gang? Today is day 15 of PR30. Actually, it's day 16, but I was unable to record yesterday, so I'm recording day 15 on day 16, and I'm going to record another one later today. But in today's Press Record 30, day 15, I want to talk about the philosopher's seclusion. It's a reference to one of Seneca's letters to Lucilius, and I would say it's probably the letter that really inspired me to dive headlong into philosophy. For those of you who are not familiar with some of the projects of Tim Ferriss, he did something called the Tao of Seneca, which is where he worked with a couple other guys, created a translation of Seneca's letters. They did illustrations and then did an audiobook recording of it. And that was my introduction to Seneca 4 or 5 years ago. I had known Marcus Aurelius before that, but then this introduced me to Seneca, which of course introduced me to Epictetus, and then the Stoics would eventually go on to become a significant portion of my first book, which the Introduction to Philosophy. But in this eighth letter, Philosopher's Seclusion, basically Seneca, so all of these letters, is just a quick background. Seneca lived around the same time as Jesus, 6 AD to like 65 AD, in Rome, and he was a senator. He was one of the first venture capitalists. He was a relatively wealthy guy, and in these letters to Lucilius, who is his friend, there also is at the end of each one, he sort of talks about how his debt is paid. And so there's all these letters to Lucilius that have different kinds of advice and kind of summing up all of his advice that he can give and sort of all of his wisdom. And it's almost as if sort of in Socrates' day there was the sophists who were paid for their wisdom, as if Seneca is being paid to deliver this wisdom to his friend Lucilius. Sort of summarize it. In this letter specifically, Seneca says a lot of the same things that Socrates said in the Apology, which we've already talked about. And it's this idea of caring about the improvement of the soul above all else. But instead of trying to pick select sections, this letter itself is only about 3 pages, so I'm just going to read the letter, and that's going to be today's episode. It starts. Do you bid me, you say, shun the throng and withdraw from men and be content with my own conscience? Where are the counsels from your school, which order a man to die in midst of active work? As to the course which I seem to you to be urging on you now and then, my object in shutting myself up and locking my door is to be able to gather, to help a greater number. I never spend a day in idleness. I appropriate even a part of the night for study. I do not allow time for sleep, but yield to it when I must. And when my eyes are wearied and waking and ready to fall shut, I keep them at their task. I have withdrawn not only from men, but from affairs, especially from my own affairs. I am working for later generations, he says, writing down some ideas that may be of assistance to them. There are certain wholesome counsels which may be compared to prescriptions of useful drugs. These I am putting into writing, for I have found them helpful in ministering my own sores, which, if not wholly cured, have at any rate ceased to spread. I point other men to the right path, which I have found late in life. When wearied with wandering, I cry out to them, avoid whatever pleases the throng, avoid the gifts of chance, halt before every good which chance brings to you, in a spirit of doubt and fear, for it is the dumb animals and fish that are deceived by tempting hopes. Do you call these things gifts of fortune? They are snares. And any man among you who wishes to live a life of safety will avoid to the utmost of his power these limed twigs of her favor, by which we mortals, most wretched in this respect also, are deceived. For we think that we hold them in our grasp, but they hold us in theirs. I want to pause here. This is actually sort of the chief point of my favorite book, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, and that is, we think that we are receiving a gift when we receive the treasures of fortune, but often What we are receiving instead is snares. That's the weight of attachment. That's the change of attachment. To be enthroned is to be ensnared. Continuing on with the letter. Such a career leads us into precipitous ways, and life on such heights ends in a fall. Moreover, we cannot even stand up against prosperity when she begins to drive us to leeward. Nor can we go down either with the ship at least on her course, or once for all. Fortune does not capsize us. She plunges our bows under and dashes us on the rocks. Hold fast, then, to this sound and wholesome rule of life, that you indulge the body only so far as is needful for good health. The body should be treated more rigorously, that it may not be disobedient to the mind. Eat merely to relieve your hunger, drink merely to quench your thirst, dress merely to keep out the cold. House yourself merely as a protection against personal discomfort. It matters little whether the house be built of turf or variously colored imported marble. Understand that a man is sheltered just as well by a thatch as by a roof of gold. And this is my favorite line. Despise everything that useless toil creates as an ornament and object of beauty, and reflect that nothing except the soul is worthy of wonder. For to the soul, if it be great, naught is great. And what he's saying here, pausing, what he's saying here is that this is the idea of Socrates also. You need to care chiefly about the improvement of the soul, and all of the material worries, to the extent that they interfere with the improvement of the soul, you should be ready to deny those things, dismiss those things, become unattached to those things, let those things go, because what matters most, above all else, is the improvement of the soul. Continuing the letter. When I commune in such terms with myself and with future generations, do you not think that I am doing more good than when I appear as counsel in court, or stamp my seal upon a will, or lend my assistance in the Senate by word or action to a candidate? Believe me, those who seem to be busied with nothing are busied with greater tasks. They are dealing at the same time with things mortal and things immortal. But I must stop and pay my customary contribution to balance this letter. The payment shall not be made from my own property, for I am still conning Epicurus. So this is another thing I understand about Seneca. The most quoted person in his letters is somebody of a different, sometimes opposite or opposing school, and that's Epicurus and Epicurus' garden. Continuing the letter. I read today in his works the following sentence. If you would enjoy real freedom, you must be a slave of philosophy. The man who submits and surrenders himself to her is not kept waiting. He is emancipated on the spot. For the very service of philosophy is freedom. It is likely that you will ask me why I quote so many of Epicurus' noble words instead of words taken from our own school, Stoicism. But is there any reason why you should regard them as sayings of Epicurus and not common property? How many poets give forth ideas that have been uttered or may be uttered by philosophers? I need not touch upon the tragedians and our writers of national drama, for these last are also somewhat serious and stand halfway between comedy and tragedy. What a quantity of sagacious verses lie buried in the mind. How many of Publius's lines are worthy of being spoken by buskin-clad actors as well as by wearers of the slipper. I shall quote one verse of his which concerns philosophy, and particularly that phase of which we were discussing a moment ago, wherein he says the gifts of chance are not to be regarded as part of our possessions. Quote, Still alien is whatever you have gained by coveting. I recall that you yourself express this idea much more happily and concisely. What chance has made yours is not really yours. And third, spoken by you still more happily shall not be omitted. The good that can be given can be removed. I shall not charge this up to my expense account because I have given it to you from your own stock. Farewell. That's the end of letter 8. If you heard some noises in the background, that's because I got this little guy on my lap. Say hi, Benjamin. Hello. He just wanted to contribute to the conversation. He also loves this letter. If you want to find the Tao of Seneca, if you just type in Tao of Seneca, Tim Ferriss, there's free PDFs, and I recommend them for anybody that isn't familiar with Seneca. The translations that are done, particularly, are very reader-friendly, and so they're a good introduction, and they're also, you could tell that they took pains to make them poetic and memorable, which I love. Richard Montgomery. I don't know if that's how you say his name. He's the guy that translated these. But anyway, highly recommend. My favorites are Letter 8. And then on the quibbling unphilosoph one thing from letter 48, I'll read real quick. So this way to the stars is my obviously first book, second book, third book. It's kind of a series, and part of the inspiration for that title comes from letter 48 on quibbling as unworthy of a philosopher. And in it he talks about the promise of philosophy, and he's talking about, why are you guys arguing about things that don't matter? Why do you men abandon your mighty promises, and after having assured me in high-sounding languages that you will permit the glitter of gold to dazzle my eyesight no more than the gleam of the sword, and that I shall with mighty steadfastness spurn both that which all men crave and that which all men fear, why you descend to the ABCs of scholastic pedants? What is your answer? And then he says, is this the path to heaven? In Latin, it is sic itur et astra, or thus is the way to the stars. That is the promise of philosophy. You combine this in Seneca with something like Dante's use of the word stars at the end of each of the installments of the Divine Comedy, and just the medieval cosmic idea generally that the stars were something like, we've talked about this previously, that the stars were something like the visible signs of the invisible, or when we look at the stars, we see something that reminds us of what is beyond the stars. So that, and I say this is the way to the stars. It partially comes from this line in Seneca. But that's all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, peace.